Welcome back, listeners. Ready for another deep dive? Today we're exploring something that's crucial to architecture, but often gets overlooked: the relationship between clients and architects.
It's more than just pretty drawings, right?
Right. There are real people behind those buildings.
Yeah,
We all admire stunning architecture, but we rarely stop to think about the human side of things, all the back and forth that goes on.
exactly. It's a whole dance of needs and expectations. Personalities, too, sometimes.
Definitely. And it all starts with the client, the person commissioning the project, and the owner, the ultimate possessor of the building. Seems straightforward at first glance.
Well, sometimes it is, but think about it this way. Let's say a developer commissions an office complex, but then before it's even finished, they sell it off.
Oh, I see where you're going with this.
Yeah, so now you've got a client who's super invested in the design but won't actually be using the building, and a new owner who inherits something they had zero input on.
Talk about a recipe for disaster.
Oh, it can get messy. And then on top of that, you've got all the other stakeholders.
Oh yeah, it's not just a two-person game, is it?
Definitely not. We're talking about anyone with a vested interest in the project, like, you know, building authorities, future tenants, even the neighbors across the street. They all have their own needs and priorities that can really shape how things go.
That makes it sound more like a crowded dance floor than a tango.
It can be, absolutely. Imagine you're working on a hospital project. Doctors want the latest and greatest facilities. The administration's got to keep things within budget. And the local community might be worried about traffic or, I don't know, noise pollution or something.
So the architect is stuck in the middle of all that.
Pretty much, yeah. They've got to be a master negotiator to find solutions that make as many people as happy as possible.
It's a balancing act.
Yeah.
So it's about more than just having a good eye for design then. You need serious diplomacy and communication skills.
You got it.
Well, speaking of different perspectives, our research highlighted the fascinating world of, well, client types. Let's break down some of these, shall we?
Let's do it.
So first up, we've got the corporate world.
Ah, yes. Efficiency in the bottom line, right? Time is money, gotta move fast, and architects need to keep up.
It's almost like a high-stakes game of chess.
Exactly. Every move impacts the project's timeline and budget. Architects working with these clients have to be ready to present clear, concise information and, anticipate any roadblocks.
And deal with a lot of pressure.
Oh, yeah, that comes with the territory.
Okay, now let's switch gears to government clients. What's unique about working with them?
Well, first off, think layers of bureaucracy, public accountability, and a ton of paperwork.
Sounds like fun.
But here's the thing. Government clients often have their own in-house experts, architects, and engineers who can really bring some valuable technical insights to the table.
So it's not all red tape and headaches.
Not at all. There's a great potential for real collaboration and knowledge sharing.
Okay, so we've got corporations, we've got government. Now, what about institutions? Like universities, hospitals, museums, those kinds of places.
These are often driven by a deeper mission, something beyond profit. Architects working with institutions have to be sensitive to that. The building itself often becomes a symbol of that mission.
So the architect becomes a kind of storyteller, in a way.
Exactly. You're using design to express the institution's core identity, which can be really rewarding.
But it also means you had to have a good understanding of the client's history, goals, and what they're all about, right?
You got it.
All right, let's not forget about those individual clients, people building their dream homes or working on their passion projects. What's it like working with them?
Well, it's much more personal. These clients often don't have a lot of construction knowledge, so the architect ends up being a kind of guide or even an educator.
And you really have to be patient and make sure they feel heard.
Absolutely. You're building more than just a structure. You're building a relationship, one built on trust and a shared vision.
That's a great point. Now, for all of you listening, think about this for a second. What kind of client would you be?
Would you be the super decisive corporate leader? Maybe the meticulous government representative? Or perhaps the passionate advocate for, say, a university or a museum? Or are you more the hands-on individual builder?
Because understanding your own style and what you expect can really shed light on how you navigate this whole client-architect dance. It's a complex but really rewarding process.
Definitely rewarding.
And as we continue our deep dive, we'll explore even more about the architect's professional responsibilities, the complexities of contracts, and the delicate art of managing expectations.
It's amazing how architects have to wear so many different hats.
It's true. They're not just designers, right? It's like they're negotiators, problem solvers, even therapists
Oh,
sometimes.
absolutely.
I mean, think about it. They're dealing with people's dreams, their investments, sometimes even their safety.
Big responsibility, which is why it's so important to have really clear agreements right from the get-go.
Laying the groundwork.
Exactly. And it's not just about avoiding headaches later down the line. It's about building that foundation of trust, making sure everyone's on the same page from day one.
So let's talk contracts. I know it's not the most exciting topic, but they really are the roadmap for the whole project. What are some of the key things that our listeners should be aware of?
Well, the scope of services is super important.
Okay, scope of services. Break that down for us.
Sure. It's basically a detailed checklist of what the architect will and won't do. Like, it outlines the design phases, who's responsible for permits and approvals, even how many revisions are included.
So it's all about setting those boundaries, preventing what they call scope creep.
Yes, scope creep is a killer. That's when you get all these extra tasks or changes that weren't originally planned for, and it can lead to unexpected costs and delays. Nobody wants that.
Definitely not. Can you give us an example of how a poorly defined scope can really mess things up? A real-world story from the trenches.
Oh, I've got a good one. I once worked on this renovation project where the client just assumed, took it for granted, that the architect would handle all the interior design stuff, picking out furniture, the whole 9 yards.
Oh, no.
Yeah, but that wasn't actually in the contract. So you can imagine what happened. It created a huge rift when the client got hit with this separate bill for all those extra services.
Ouch. I bet that didn't go over well.
Not at all. And that's how you end up with resentment and maybe even legal battles. Nobody wins in that situation.
It's a good reminder to read the fine print, right? So what about those times when a client has this grand vision that just doesn't match up with their budget? How do architects deal with that?
It's tough. Architects have this ethical obligation to be realistic with their clients. They have to explain what certain design choices will actually cost and try to offer alternatives that might work better with their financial constraints.
So sometimes it's about gently bringing them back down to earth.
Exactly. Like reminding them that, sure, a soaring atrium might look amazing, but it could totally blow their budget.
There are always trade-offs.
Right. And it's not just about budget either. There are building codes, zoning regulations, even limitations on the site itself. Sometimes the real skill of an architect lies in figuring out how to work within those limitations to still achieve the best possible outcome.
So you're saying constraints can actually spark creativity.
I think so. It forces you to think outside the box.
That makes sense. Okay, we've talked about contracts, and we've talked about managing those expectations, but let's not forget about another really crucial element: communication.
Ah, yes. Communication is key. It's the lifeblood of any good client-architect relationship.
It really is.
And it's not just about how often you talk. It's about being clear, actively listening, and making sure both sides feel like they're being heard and understood.
Makes me think about those client types we were discussing earlier. Would an architect approach communication differently with, say, a corporate client versus someone building their own home?
Oh, absolutely. With a corporate client, communication tends to be more formal, more data-driven, all about efficiency. So think presentations, reports, concise emails, that kind of thing. But with someone building their own home, it's much more personal. You might focus on building rapport, using sketches and visual aids to explain your ideas, and just being really patient with their questions and concerns.
So tailoring your approach to the client's personality and what they need.
Exactly. It's like speaking different languages, but the goal is always the same: to build a shared understanding.
I like that. Now, it's not just about the architect doing all the talking, right?
Of course not. It's a two-way street. Architects need to be good at explaining their ideas, but they also need to be great listeners. They have to really listen to the client's feedback, their concerns, what they're hoping to achieve.
It sounds like the client-architect relationship is almost like a partnership.
That's a great way to put it. Like any good partnership, it's built on trust, respect, and a willingness to compromise.
And when it works well, it can lead to some pretty incredible results.
Absolutely.
Okay, so we've talked a lot about how these relationships work once they're already in motion, but let's rewind a bit. How do these relationships even begin? How do clients find architects in the first place?
Well, sometimes they already have a relationship with an architect, maybe from a previous project or through personal connections. That's called sole sourcing, where the client just picks the architect directly based on their experience and trust.
So kind of like calling your favorite mechanic when your car needs a tune-up.
Exactly. But for larger projects, clients might not have a go-to architect.
Makes sense.
In those cases, it's usually more formal. They might put out a request for proposal or RFP where they outline what they need for the project, their budget, and how they'll choose an architect. Then architectural firms submit these detailed proposals outlining their qualifications, approach, and of course, their fees.
So it's like a job application, but for architects.
You got it. Clients will look through all the proposals and often choose a few firms to interview and give presentations.
It's a chance for both sides to see if it's a good fit, not just professionally, but personally too, I imagine.
For sure, because it's not just about finding the most talented architect. It's about finding someone who gets their vision and who they can really work well with throughout the process.
Finding that synergy.
Exactly. And some clients might go for something even more creative, like a design competition.
Oh, tell me more about that.
So they'll invite a bunch of firms to submit design concepts based on a specific brief. It's a way to explore all sorts of different ideas and find some really innovative solutions. Plus, it lets the client see how different architects approach a problem.
So it's like a battle of the blueprints.
It can be, yeah. Really exciting stuff.
Okay, I think it's time to address the elephant in the room. Let's talk money. What's the deal with architectural fees?
Oh yeah, the money talk. Well, architectural fees can vary a lot. It depends on the project, how complex it is, the architect's experience, and even their reputation. Some charge hourly rates, others prefer fixed fees, and some work on a percentage of the overall construction cost.
So there's no one right way to do it.
Nope. Every project is different, but the most important thing is transparency. Architects should be upfront about how they calculate their fees and what's included, and clients should feel totally comfortable asking questions and negotiating a fee structure that works for both sides.
Open communication.
Always. And it's important to remember that the value an architect brings goes way beyond just design. They're problem solvers, they're advisors, they're advocates for their clients. They're making sure the project not only functions well, but also fulfills those aspirations and leaves a lasting impact.
That's a great point. And it reminds us that at the end of the day, architecture is about people, understanding their needs, their aspirations, their dreams, and then using design to translate all of that into physical spaces that enrich lives and shape communities.
And the client-architect relationship is right at the heart of that whole process. It's complex, it's dynamic, and yeah, it can be challenging. But when it works, it can create something truly extraordinary.
Well said. Stay with us for our final segment, where we'll dive into some real-world examples of how those client-architect dynamics have shaped some of the most iconic buildings throughout history. Welcome back to the show. We're wrapping up our deep dive into the world of client-architect relationships. And as promised, we're going to take a trip through time to see how these dynamics have shaped some of the most iconic buildings in history.
Kind of like peeking behind the curtain, right?
Exactly. It's a reminder that architecture isn't just about looks. It's about the human stories behind those walls. So let's fire up our time machine and head back to ancient Rome for a second. Picture this: a powerful emperor, a visionary architect, and this goal of creating a building that would symbolize Roman might for centuries to come.
Ah, the Colosseum. A true marvel of engineering and a testament to Emperor Vespasian's ambition.
Vespasian really wanted to create a spectacle, a place for those gladiatorial combats and public entertainment that would just blow people away. It's like he basically gave the architect a blank check and said, make it epic.
And epic it was. The Colosseum could hold something like 80,000 spectators. That's incredible for the time.
It is, but it's not just about size, right?
Right. The architect had to think about crowd flow, safety, even the acoustics, to make sure the roar of the crowd would echo throughout the arena.
I can only imagine the discussions, the debates, all the logistical headaches that went into building something so massive. Must have been this constant push and pull between Vespasian's grand vision and the, practical realities of actually building it.
Oh, I'm sure. And you can actually see evidence of those compromises in the design. For example, they used concrete, which was a relatively new material back then.
Interesting.
Yeah. It allowed for faster construction and more flexibility in shaping those huge arches and vaults. It shows how the architect was willing to embrace new ideas to meet the emperor's ambitious deadline.
It's amazing how even back then, in ancient Rome, those core dynamics of client expectations, architectural expertise, and all that back and forth negotiation were shaping the built environment. Okay, let's fast forward a few centuries now to Renaissance Florence. There we find another iconic structure, the Duomo, and another fascinating client-architect relationship.
The Duomo's dome, that masterpiece of architectural daring, is really all about Filippo Brunelleschi. He's a legend, a true genius of design and engineering. But his journey to create this iconic dome was filled with rivalry, setbacks, and a client who wasn't afraid to push the limits.
Okay, give us the story. What were some of the challenges Brunelleschi faced in bringing this dome to life?
Well, the city of Florence, they were the client in this case, had been struggling for decades to figure out how to cover this massive cathedral. They'd had competitions, consultations. Nothing seemed to work. It felt impossible.
So Brunelleschi came on with a totally new idea.
He did. He proposed this double-shelled dome, which was radical at the time. It used a system of interlocking bricks and this herringbone pattern to distribute the weight.
Sounds pretty ingenious.
It was, but it met with a lot of resistance from the city officials who were, understandably hesitant to take such a big risk on an untested method.
I bet Brunelleschi had to do some serious convincing.
Oh, he did. He was passionate about his vision, built models to prove it would work, and in the end, his unwavering belief in his design won them over. And the rest, as they say, is history. The Duomo's dome stands as a testament to Brunelleschi's brilliance, but also to the city's willingness to embrace innovation and take a chance.
It's a perfect example of how a strong client-architect relationship, even one that has its bumps along the way, can lead to something truly extraordinary. Okay, one last stop on our architectural journey. Let's jump to 20th century New York City and the iconic Guggenheim Museum.
Oh, the Guggenheim. It's a building that's just as captivating as the art it houses, and it perfectly embodies this clash between a bold vision, a demanding client, and a revolutionary architect.
Set the stage for us.
All right, so you've got Solomon R. Guggenheim, an art collector with really avant-garde tastes. He wanted a museum that would challenge conventions and redefine the whole museum experience.
Sounds ambitious.
It was. And then he found his match in Frank Lloyd Wright, an architect known for his unconventional designs and, well, his equally strong personality.
A clash of the titans.
You could say that. Wright envisioned this spiraling ramp, this continuous journey through art, almost like a pilgrimage. It was groundbreaking, completely shattering the traditional idea of a museum as this boxy, compartmentalized space.
It's such a unique and immersive experience. But I've heard that the relationship between Guggenheim and Wright wasn't always easy.
Oh, definitely not. They were both passionate, strong-willed individuals. They clashed over details, budgets, even the placement of the artwork. There's this famous story about Wright absolutely refusing to install air conditioning because he thought it would disrupt the natural airflow within the spiral.
Sounds like there were some epic battles of will. But in the end, their shared passion for pushing boundaries and creating something truly innovative kept them working together.
Exactly. And the result is a building that has become a global icon, a symbol of what can happen when people collaborate, even when there's creative tension.
So from the grandeur of the Colosseum to the soaring dome of the Duomo and the spiraling elegance of the Guggenheim, we've seen how these client-architect relationships have shaped architectural history. And even though the players and the styles might change, the fundamentals remain the same: communication, collaboration, and that intricate dance between vision and practicality.
It's true. The next time you walk by a building, take a moment to think about all the relationships and decisions that are woven into its very fabric. Think about the client's dreams, the architect's ingenuity, and all those hours of debate, compromise, and creative problem-solving that brought it to life.
It's a great reminder that architecture is so much more than just bricks and mortar. It's a reflection of our aspirations, our creativity, and the power of collaboration. Thanks for joining us on this architectural adventure. We'll see you next time for another deep dive.